We'll start when you tell us to.
You can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Well, good morning and welcome. My name is Gaurav Rastogi, and I'll be your instructor today for the class on Hinduism. I'd like to invite you to just sit quietly for a few minutes, for a few moments, and open a space for reflection. I'll begin with an opening prayer in Sanskrit, and I will describe the meaning to you as well. So for now, just sit comfortably, sit in any comfortable posture. Sit with your back straight, back, neck, and head in a straight line. The back is straight but not stiff. If you're sitting on a chair, put your feet in full contact with the floor below. The heels, the toes, everything in full contact. Relax the expression on the face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. As you breathe in, let the breath travel into the belly. Let the belly expand as you inhale. Let the belly go as you exhale. Breathing in, let the belly expand. Breathing out, simply let go. Let go of all your thoughts swirling around in the head. Just let those balloons fly away. Breathing into the belly, let the belly expand. Breathing out, let all your thoughts, all your preoccupations go away. Breathing into the belly, breathing out, feel a sense of lightness and freedom. If you'd like to join me in the prayer, bring your palms together in Namaskar Mudra, pressing the palms together in front of the heart center, pressing the palms together gently, touching the fingers together gently, gently touching the back of the thumbs into the chest. Now hold your attention here at the hollow space between the palms. Pay attention to any vibration, any sensation. Keep your attention here. We're going to chant Om 3 times, and then I'll chant the opening prayer in Sanskrit. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. 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 Inhale, and then I'll chant. Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Take your arms behind you, eyes are still closed. Grab your right wrist with your left hand and breathing in, stretch. Breathing out, bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in, release your hands, rub your palms together to generate some heat, and then gently cup your eyeballs with your hollow palms to transfer that heat, massaging the face and the neck. Now blinking, open your eyes and pull your palms back and open look. Namaskar. Good morning and welcome to today's class. I am going to tell you a little bit about what you just heard, and then I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Okay, so this is the opening prayer. This is what we just chanted. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu. The Sanskrit is written on the bottom left of my screen that you're seeing over here. And the transliteration is on the right. That's how you might read it if you don't read Sanskrit text. And then above that is the meaning. This is a traditional Upanishadic prayer. It's a traditional prayer. It does not refer to God by any name or many names. It does not even refer to that idea. It's almost to whomsoever it may concern. But the prayer itself is a traditional prayer chanted at the beginning of a discourse in the Hindu tradition, and typically yoga classes do that as well. It's sort of a legal agreement in Sanskrit, which is may we both be protected, both as in both of us listening and speaking, may we both be nourished, may we work together with great energy, may our knowledge be radiant, may there be no differences or disputes between us. Om, peace. I said Shanti 3 times. Peace, peace. Those are the 3 Shantis that you heard at the end. And that's the opening prayer. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Okay, my name is, my official name is what's on the left side. I'm a software executive. I've founded startups. I've worked in the AI space. I do mostly sales. I have a conventional engineering plus MBA education, and that's my business side. And that's I continue to operate. I live here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have a family, 2 kids, and that's the business side. On the right side is my spiritual side. I'm a yogi. I'm yogi of the posture variety. Of course, I teach postural yoga, but I also teach breath work, pranayam, and meditation. I have 2 foundations, one that I direct myself, and at the other, we teach a course very similar to the chaplaincy course that you have, or spiritual direction course. The institute is called Hindu Community Institute, and we have a course called Counselor of Hindu Tradition. Think of it as a pre-chaplaincy course. People do our course and then go on to GTU to do their interreligious chaplaincy program. And our project here is to create a whole continuum of care in the community. In today's conversation, I'm going to tell you, of course, there are 3 parts to today's conversation. We may take as many or as few breaks as you like. This is an interactive conversation, so I encourage you to raise your hand and ask me questions when you feel like asking a question, and I will come to you. There is no question that's too simple or too complex. You can ask any question, and I try to answer as much as I can. So 3 parts to today's conversation. Part 1 is I'll give you an introduction to Hinduism, including in the West. I will also show you a little bit of what goes on in a Hindu temple, because it's often a source of much curiosity for people who haven't visited in quotes, and I use in quotes very visibly, the idol worshippers layer. So I will show you what's happening inside a temple so you see what's going on. And then the third part is I will talk to you about the idea of spiritual direction in the Hindu tradition and what we are doing to build that whole continuum of care. Now, with that said, I'd like to pause here and ask if you have any questions or comments before we get into the deep end of today's conversation. Any reflections? I know you've had a busy week and it is a Sunday morning. Any reflections on what you've heard so far? And are there questions that you are really eager to get answers to today that you'd like me to address? Okay, Lucy, and then Lewis.
Yes, sir. Just for clarification, can you explain specifically what is meant by breath work?
Sure. Okay, I will explain. Okay, and then Lucy, what is your question?
My question is on a video that I watched. Someone had said there is no religion, there's no such religion as Hinduism because there are many different sects of Hinduism, and so that there is not one. So I'm a little confused by that.
Sure. I'll address some of that question, and I didn't want to begin by quoting Bill Clinton at the front end of today's conversation, so I will refrain from answering your question directly. I will get to it at the end of the first hour. All right, now you don't need to see the slide. That's just for show. I will, when I need to show you the slide, I will swap my face around and you'll see a tiny face and large slide and cursor. I think that should work. But if the slide is at any point illegible, I will, if you let me know, I will try to address it. Breath work. So Louis, that is a great question. Almost every spiritual tradition that is spiritual talks about breathing as at the core of the system, because of course the spirit itself is breath. Spirit literally is breath. When you inspire, you are taking in breath. When you expire, well, that's your last breath. And in other traditions, ruh, Jewish traditions as well as in Islam as well, ruh is breath. In the Sanskrit and in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, breath is prana, and prana is not merely the physical, the moving of the lungs, but the moving of the energy itself is breath work. And when we teach breath work, the Hindu tradition is, the foundational practices in the Hindu tradition, there are many, but one of those is the practice of yoga. And with not just the postures that you do at a studio, which is great, but the practice of yoga is that of merging the lower self to the higher self. One of the big practices in that foundational is breath work, where you learn to stabilize your breath, because you can't control the mind. It's a bunch of rabbits sitting in the brain. You can't control them directly, because if you send another rabbit chasing after the rabbits, you got 9 rabbits, you add another rabbit to chase after them, that's 10 rabbits, and so on. So you can't control the mind by the mind alone, but through the breath you can. So there's a lot of science that goes into breathing itself. There are, many religious or spiritual traditions within the Hindu spectrum. All they teach is breath work. In fact, their entire teaching is breath work, because you do the practice, everything else automatically unfolds, and the merging with God is experienced by simply following the practice. So it's a very deep and very dearly held tradition. I hope that clarifies. I can give you more detail if you like, but that's a very broad level answer. All right, now Hindu tradition. Hindu tradition is a fun tradition, especially if you're a fan of Hollywood, because of course, Hindus are everywhere apparently, but except in Hollywood, California, because of course, are there any Indiana Jones fans in the house? Anyone who's watched Indiana Jones movies? Well, here's a scene from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, right? Exciting. This was back in the 80s, and it was kind of cool, cool to poke fun at these horned helmet wearing Hindus. And I'm guessing some people still hold that this is your typical Hindu from India that might look like. But of course, it's been 30 years from this. And of course, if they had this movie now, I guarantee they'd be canceled. And our appreciation of what the Hindu tradition is has actually grown in the West over these years since this caricature. And so I'm here to describe a tradition to you that seems unfamiliar, but I guarantee just like this piece of sliced bread is going to be very ubiquitous. A lot of the ideas in the tradition are actually very familiar to you. So by the end of this conversation, I hope to transmit to you the sense that this is a tradition you already know and understand, because just like this sliced bread, you've had many slices of this tradition, you really like it. Let me give you a few examples. I used the word, I chanted Om in the beginning. You might have heard this Om sound at a yoga studio or anywhere else in the practice. If I use the word Dharma, or I guarantee everyone in this knows the word karma. If you know the word karma, which is, of course, people usually say it's a female dog. It is not. Karma is a very sophisticated theory, but hey, Hollywood caricatures are what they are. If you've heard the word Pandit, it's a Sanskrit word and means very different from what you might have seen on TV. If I do Namaste, you sort of know what it is. And I can go on. If I tell you that reincarnation is a core part of the Hindu tradition, it was an alien concept maybe 30 years ago, but now people understand what it means. Cremation. We cremate are dead, except a couple of notable exceptions. And as it turns out, a majority of Americans now cremate their dead. And that's a very familiar practice. Vegetarianism, I'm personally vegetarian. I was born into a vegetarian family. And when I arrived here in this country 22 years ago, it was really tough to find vegetarian food. But now, thanks to the widespread adoption of vegetarianism, I can actually find food which is not sides of rice and beans at pretty much anywhere in the United States. And this concern about ecology and a living, breathing ecosystem, all of these are things that are core to Hinduism and are in fact quite well received. So in that sense, a lot of things that I've told you, that I will tell you, are actually very familiar to you. Now, a scientist, Niels Bohr, once said that apropos of everything 2020 and beyond, is that there are some things that are so serious that you have to laugh at them. And so I'm going to begin with a bunch of canned jokes, and I hope you're going to like those. You will tell me if you can hear them. If you don't, I'll have to figure out how to do this a little differently. All right. Now, Hindu ideas are all around. One second. I'm going to pause. Were you able to hear whatever that guy was saying? Yes? All right, good. I'm going to restart. Now, Hindu ideas are all around, and without knowing it, you might already be a Hindu. Here's how to find out. You might be a Hindu if you've used this pickup line. Yeah, no, it didn't work out in that life either. You might be a Hindu if back in high school you had a dream. In that dream, your priest said, "You're not going straight to hell for not believing in God." You never told anyone about that dream. You might be a Hindu if back in high school you told your mom, "I only believe in science." She wasn't having any of it, right? Show me your AP Science grades. You might be a Hindu if your yoga teacher welcomes you with a Namaste and you hang back after class to correct the pronunciation. Hi, excuse me, it's Namaste. Thank you. You might be a Hindu if Wes Anderson announces his next movie and you're like, "I would like my ashes to be sprinkled in the Pacific Ocean." You might be a Hindu if you voted yes on "Are we living in a simulation?" The Matrix certainly does not have you enlightened Buddhas. You might be a Hindu if after yesterday's elections you thought, "Oh my God does not adequately cover all the gods that should be asked to set things right." You might be a Hindu if you hear Apu from Simpsons say, "Thank you, come again," and wondered if he was talking about reincarnation. And that is how you know if you might be a Hindu. All right, I hope the audio was clear. If not, I'm going to have to repeat the jokes and it's not going to be pleasant. All right. Okay. All right. So a lot of the ideas in the Hindu tradition are familiar. My own grounding in Hinduism is, of course, I'm born into a Hindu family. Hinduism is a very wide spectrum of beliefs, and you have to really think hard about what's going on. And since I've traveled out of India over the last 22 years, I've had occasion to fully look back and reflect at the tradition and truly understand what it means. When you live in the tradition, it's very hard to understand what it is because it's in the air you breathe, the water that you drink. And in fact, the latest Pew survey in India said that even Christian and Muslim people, citizens of India, believe in karma in a majority, and most even believe in reincarnation. A good chunk even believe in reincarnation, which are foundational to the Hindu tradition and not necessarily conducive to other religious beliefs and other systems of belief. But it's in the air you breathe, so you don't notice it until you're gone. In my case, I grew up and I went through a Christian education because I went to a Christian school through elementary and middle, and a good part of my high school as well. So this is fourth grade moral science. I remember Mr. Dorsey, a Presbyterian teacher, and that's the school I went to. And I remember looking at the map of, somewhere in the Middle East, finding Canaan next to the Sea of Galilee because we were learning the Hebrew Bible at the time. So I have, some familiarity with both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament through all my years of schooling. And of course, I grew up in the family, so I understand that. So I'm able to understand some of the moral precepts of the Abrahamic traditions. Now, I'm going to begin with a quick story. This is a fun story. It's a story in the Hindu tradition known as the Brahman's Gift. The Brahmin is a priest. This is a person who does priest work. And the story goes that there's a young Brahmin priest who goes to another village to perform some rituals. And as a gift, he is given a goat. And it's evening, he's beginning to travel back to his village. And he slings the goat on his shoulders and he starts walking. And one guy stops him. He says, "Hey, Brahmin, why are you carrying a cow on your shoulders?" And the Brahmin says, "What are you talking about? This is a goat. This is not a cow. Are you blind? What's wrong with you?" Keeps walking. He goes around another corner. Another guy stops and says, "Hey, Brahmin, why do you have a donkey on your shoulders?" And the Brahmin says, "What's wrong with this village? This is a goat, not a donkey. I don't know what you guys are talking about." Keeps walking, but is beginning to feel that there's something that's wrong. Keeps walking to the edge of the village. And at the edge of the village, the third guy, apparently this is a collaboration between the three. The third guy stops and he says, "Brahmin, this is a dirty dog on your shoulders. Why are you, a clean priest, carrying a dirty dog on your shoulders?" At this point, the Brahmin's thinking, well, this is a shape-shifting demon on my shoulders. It's either a donkey or a calf or a dog, certainly not a donkey. I'm going to go through the jungle to my village. This is not worth having on my shoulder. He throws the goat down and runs away into the jungle back to his village. And we're told the story because, of course, the moral of the story for us is very simply, don't let the crooks tell you what's what. Which is to say, don't let other people that are interested in breaking down your religion or completely you're telling you that your tradition is not useful. Don't let them tell you what's what. You have to look for yourself, because otherwise this is a shape-shifting demon. Who knows what the heck you're carrying on your back? And so that's the sense with which I have approached the tradition. This is a very old story in the tradition. Hinduism itself is a continuous transmission. It is a living and breathing system. An alternate name for this tradition is Sanatana Dharma. I'm going to say this again and I'll explain what the words mean. Sanatan Dharma. No, and I know it has a lot of A's and a lot of N's and T's, so it might sound different when you read it yourself. So I'll say it again, Sanatana Dharma. Now, Sanatan literally means that which does not change with time. It has a relationship with time, and the relationship is that it does not change with time. If, for example, it's true in 2020 and not true in 2021, then it's not COVID-19 because it's still around. But if something that's true on Monday, not true on Wednesday, and true on Friday again, then that thing is not true. It has a relationship with time, which is conditional. So something that's outside of that time is Sanatan, timeless, before and outside of the idea of time. And Dharma itself is that which changes with space, time, and context. And Dharma is the relationship that we have to each other, the order that the universe maintains and has. All of those are ideas inside Dharma, and I'll cover a few of those in the next few minutes. But those two words are juxtaposed together to form this entire tradition. So imagine a spinning wheel within a center that does not spin and the edge that always spins. And within its breadth, it covers everything that's inside and outside of time and space. That's the breadth of the tradition. And in that sense, we're always trying to discover that which is changing and that which is changeless. And it's a process of discovery. We do not have a system of prophets who come down and tell us and have revelations. We do have revelations from sages, but those are typically not messianic or prophetic. Our revelations are mostly about to do with the true reality of the world as it is. But those revelations many times similar to, and I'll talk about this later, how Einstein might come down and say E equals mc squared. Einstein goes up a mountain, comes back with a tablet that says E equals mc squared. Well, what are you going to do about it? Right? Can you create a moral code out of E equals mc squared? And the answer is no, you can't. So all those findings of our saints and sages, those findings have to be translated into a social order. And those social orders that result from those findings are the popular versions of Hinduism that you see around, but they should follow from those. So the foundational work is direct perception. And there's a lot to this reality which is imposed upon us by conditionality. I'm not going to parse it, there's too much going in there, but so it is a living and breathing system, suffice to say. Now, I'm all about pop culture, so here's another slide I like to show, which is European reductionism is absolutely absurd. What it does, so in the 16, 17, 1800s, 1900s, European scientists and ethnographers went all over the world and gifted people the gift of new histories and new religions, which is to say, they were, you half understand something, you go unbelievable, the civilizational genius that goes west from Europe and lands into a country and calls them Indians. And that's what we're dealing with. This is that kind of civilizational genius that goes from Europe to North America and finds the people here and calls them Indians because, your charter is East India Company. You find whatever and you call them Indians. That's the civilizational genius that goes to other countries and mixes culture, history, precedents, and prejudices and calls it a religion. And that's the state of European reductionism as it pertains to every tradition, but I'm speaking more vehemently about the Hindu tradition because that's what I know. Everything is reduced down to comical caricatures. It is not so. And I'll give you a few examples of that as well. But there's a lot going on in this very vibrant, very colorful, and very deep philosophical tradition that isn't obvious and cannot be understood by reading Wikipedia, which, for example, all the Hindu pages on Wikipedia cite as a primary source Max Muller. Max Muller is a just German fellow in the 1800s, never traveled to India, 0 times, but is considered an expert in a foundational piece upon which all the future Indologists have built their work. And here's a guy who's never traveled to India. What does he know about our tradition? He does not live the tradition. He's describing it almost as if you would describe an autopsy. A patient is dead. Here's what the patient will, weighed like. Not a biopsy, not a living, breathing system or a creature, but here's something that's dead. And Hinduism is not dead, and has a lot going on. So I'll try to explain. This is not a tirade. I just want to tell you that a lot of the things that you think you might know about the Hindu tradition are not actually quite true. All right. I'm going to pause here because I've been through quite a lot of rapid movement. Any questions or reflections at this stage?
I have a reflection here, and that is the topic of Einstein and the E equals MC squared. And yeah, I'm just kind of going to reiterate what I've gleaned from certain things I've heard about that. And yeah, that definitely is an amazing discovery, scientific discovery from a genius. And yet at the same time, Einstein, in discovering that, realized that, yeah, there really is no such thing as time.
Yes.
I find that so interesting. And also at the same time, realize that, wow, there really is a higher being out there. We don't know maybe what exactly it is, but it definitely exists. And for someone to be so scientifically based, yet realize that with his mind, I just find beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful and wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Susan, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just in the view of Westerners interpreting Sanatana Dharma, as I was trying to learn to pronounce it.
You got it.
We read Huston Smith, in preparation for this class and learning, and also we read some Hindu sacred texts, but I really enjoyed, so I have traveled to India, and I felt confused and overwhelmed and all kinds of things, and I just was so impressed by how Huston Smith sympathetically portrayed the religion. I didn't know if you had a comment on how you find his work in kind of, we've read him in relation to other faith traditions as well, but as a Westerner, how is he doing interpreting the tradition to others?
Sure. Last I read Smith was a few years ago, but as I recall, it was a very sympathetic and positive take. Overall, very good. The problem with conveying anything is you have to simplify to convey. And when you simplify, you sort of caricature. Hinduism, as I'll explain in the next few minutes, is not defined, but experienced. And a definition, for example, will be, here's the 10 commandments, here's what you do or don't do. And experience is what you figure out by doing and by learning from your antecedents and your predecessors. So in that sense, if you write anything down, it's almost always, in fact, a lot of sages in the Hindu tradition say the following things: I say it, and as soon as I say it, I have regretted it. Because as soon as you say something, it has been boiled down into, its dualities and paradoxes have been reduced to one singularity, which means it's already incorrect. So Guru Nanak said that, in his thing as well, "Jeko kahe piche pachtaye," whoever says immediately regrets. And of course, in Taoism, the Tao that can be explained is not the Tao, right? Which is the way cannot be explained. And that's the problem with any written text or any written tradition, where the word is the foundational stuff. As soon as you write it, it's already eliminating a lot of things. And words have baggage and meanings that don't translate or travel over time. And so meanings can be misinterpreted, as I'm sure all of us know. But being an experienced tradition, you can experience it. It's very overwhelming. Hey, Michael. And hello, little child on Michael's screen. All right, any other question or reflection on what you've heard so far? Reflection. Louis, I know you're thinking. I can see a thought bubble on your head. No? All right, no volunteers. We'll move right along. All right, let's talk about a few of the big ideas that the Hindu tradition has. Now, these are tenets. They're not necessarily, rules or laws, but tenets. They're useful to understand. Now, I'll just describe a really quick tour of a few things that are fun for our class. One itself is the idea of time. Time in the Hindu tradition. Time is actually in many different versions of the Hindu tradition, God is time, whether it's Shiva as Mahakal or Krishna saying in the Bhagavad Gita that I am time. J. Robert Oppenheimer quoted that. And so time is God, of course, but also time is circular. And in the Hindu tradition, time is amazingly circular in so many ways. Of course, annual time is circular. Because of course the seasons come around. Lifetime is circular, we reincarnate, but also the universe time or multiverse time is also circular. This universe is created and destroyed, created and destroyed. There is no stopping of this pulsation of energy and which we form the universe. Now this idea of circular time is important because it changes the moral code with which you work. It changes in the most foundational, fundamental manner, which is if you're not going to have one life and a coin toss later, infinite hell or infinite heaven, but instead a coming and going and an iteration, more Groundhog Day than infinite hell, then what happens is you have a chance at improvement, you have a chance at learning, you have a chance at moving and understanding that all this flux is the nature of the universe itself. And so that comes, I'm just parsing that from just the idea of time itself. But we move along to another idea, which is from the Hindu tradition. Famous, not so famous, and probably infamous European philosopher once said, no one goes out to buy zero fish. If you've heard Roman numerals, if you read or studied Roman numerals, you may remember that there is no zero figure in the Roman numerals. And in fact, all of the West did not have the idea of zero because no one goes to buy zero fish. It's a useless concept. Not merely that, the void is to be avoided for a wide variety of reasons in the West because, there be dragons or demons or whatever the heck. But here's the thing in the Hindu tradition. The Hindu tradition invented the zero, but also arrived at the idea of the zero and the mathematical system that came out of it. The Hindu tradition, math and science are not separated. Math, science, government are not separated. Math, science, government, how you eat, what you eat, everything is included in the practice of Hinduism. So is the zero. Shunya is a very important concept in the Buddhist and Hindu tradition for that reason. Nothingness is also filled with everythingness. And that is how the idea of a zero came about in the Hindu tradition. It's a very core part of the Hindu tradition. Now, and I should have mentioned up front, and it should have been obvious when I showed you the bread up front, that that I'm going to talk about food all day. So next I come to the idea of an infinity. Now, I do sense that you were not able to hear me clearly when I played the video. Was that the case? That was the case. All right, let's see if I can share audio in addition. Okay, I think, okay, no, I think I shared the wrong thing. I stopped share. Let me see if I can do audio alone. Sorry, I'm messing with the system here. Let's try advanced computer audio. Okay, I think this should work. You can, okay, now I'm going to describe to you the idea of infinity. Infinity is a very central, like with zero, like with time, infinity is a central foundational principle of Hinduism. Why? Because infinity is that from which everything comes out of and goes back in. And there's a very well-loved text, one verse that goes the following way. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. From infinity comes infinity. From infinity, when infinity is taken out, infinity still remains. And that infinity is our concept of God himself or herself, which is we come from God, and God doesn't become lesser because we have come from God. We are no less complete because we have come from God. And when we go back into God, God still remains. So infinity is also our concept of God itself. But don't take my word for it. I'm going to take you to a breakfast club, including our friend. This is a Nobel Prize winning speech, so you may please accord it the appropriate.
I will start by explaining to you a concept from the citation that might not be familiar to you, and that's the concept of topology. So I brought my lunch, and here you see, it's a cinnamon bun. Here I have another thing. I have a bagel, okay? And here I have a pretzel. It's a Swedish pretzel with 2 holes in it. Now, for us, you know, these things are very different. This is sweet, this is perhaps salty, different shapes, etc. But if you are a topologist, it's only one thing that is really interesting with these things in which they differ. This thing has no hole. The bagel has 1 hole. The pretzel has 2 holes. The number of holes is what the topologist would call a topological invariant.
All right. And that's all the Nobel Prize speeching you're going to get from me. But I hope you got the idea. It's something you have to think about long after today's class, which is at breakfast or whenever you're having your pretzel. There's 1 hole in the bagel, you twist it around, 2 holes, you twist it around, 3 holes, right? Did you get 1.5 holes or 2.34 holes or 3.14157 holes? And the answer is no, you only get whole holes. And obviously my English pronunciation removes that W because I'm from India. The whole is something you need to understand, because wholeness comes from wholeness. When we were born from our mother's belly, our mother did not become less of a person because we were born. We are not incomplete. We do not feel this incompletion as such. There is a whole, H-O-L-E, at the center of ourselves, a sense of incompleteness that drives us mad. It drives us into action. It forces us to consume. And that incompleteness comes from our mother and her mother and going all the way back to the source. The completeness and incompleteness are both inherited from this infinite chain of causation. And that sense of infinity also is very core to the Hindu tradition. At this point, I usually break out another joke, but I'm going to spare you the jokes because we're running over time. I have more canned jokes because why not? I'll come back if you feel like it, or if you have, bring your bagel. But let me come to another idea. Again, it's my breakfast club. I invite you to avocados. And here's a rhetorical question for you. Every time you have your avocado toast next, you will see the bread and remember that there's a piecemeal consumption of Hinduism. You will see the avocado and ask yourself this question. This avocado, you bought it from Costco, at which point you could not take it into an airplane because this damn thing is a grenade. You could lob it at somebody and hurt them severely. It's so hard. So, this thing is a rock. You could throw it at people and it could, that projectile could hurt people. But give or take between 2 weeks to 8 weeks, I can't tell, but at some point this thing ripens, right? The avocado is not connected through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to its tree or to Costco. It is not receiving over-the-air software updates that said, thou shalt now ripen, do your ripening thing now. It's not happening. The avocado ripens. Now, the question I have for you is, who ripens the avocado? This is the foundational question that actually begins at the earliest book that we remember, earliest memories of the Hindu tradition that we have communicated to us. In the Rig Veda, a sense of order is what is being investigated, not the nature of God, not the nature of the creator and how we may worship. Those are secondary. The first is the recognition that there is order in the universe. You work back from the order to what might cause the order to be. But the order is important. And so what ripens the avocado is an important question. We did not have avocados. We had trees, we had flowers, we had fruits, but you get the idea that there is a sense of order in this universe that must be understood and experienced and investigated fully, thoroughly. And that is how we sense order. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the nature of truth. I'm just giving you, remember, a series of core foundational principles in the Hindu tradition. You will hopefully remember the wheel of time, the zero fish that you went out to buy, the bagel and the pretzel holes, and the avocado. You've got a bunch of stuff, but now you got to have greens in your salad. Greens in your salad are this, which is, here's a question. I'm going to ask you this very very scientific question. Why is a leaf green? Not a rhetorical question. I want the answer to it. What might you say?
Chlorophyll.
That's right. It's chlorophyll. Good. Well, 10 points to Gryffindor for that one. Any other answers? Christina.
Yeah,
It's reflecting all the colors in the spectrum except green.
Fantastic. 10 more points to Hufflepuff right there. This is great. Great answers, but in the wrong class, you get 0 points. You get the idea. In the physics class, your reflection thing is fine, but your chlorophyll answer is BS. You get 0 points for it, right? But you go to the biology class and you tell them this reflection mumbo jumbo, you're out of this class. You're getting 0 for that, right? Truth. What is the nature of truth is the question I have for you. Mathematicians and zealots. I will repeat this. Only mathematicians and zealots agree. Let me rephrase. Mathematicians and zealots only agree on one thing, which is there is one right answer. The fact is that the truth cannot be contained in one right answer, and there are many ways of understanding truth. And this might seem like an innocuous type of statement, but it is foundational to your understanding of the world and mine. Why? Because it turns out the one right answer kind of thinking leads you to many wrong answer kind of people that must be eliminated. But in the core of Hindu tradition is this thinking, this knowing that there is, God is one, but we know them by many ways. You know, the truth is one, but the wise know it by many ways. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, but the wise may know it by many ways. Understanding the equal validity of different systems of truth is foundational to Hinduism, which is why now I will answer, Lucy, your question on is Hinduism a religion or not? And there are so many sects and so on. There are millions and billions of sects in the Hindu tradition. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the point of the Hindu tradition is that your truth is your truth, my friend. It does not matter. What matters is that you are seeking after truth. Because as long as you're seeking after truth and you're following, sources of systems of truth, that's fine. The problem is in this, if you have a Roach Motel kind of thing that you can check in but not check out, then you have a type of truth system that says there's a truth, but if you're in that truth, that's great. But if you're not in the truth, oh my God, you're going straight to hell forever. Then you have a system that is just, that's not compatible with the Hindu system, because for us, as long as your truth is your truth for you, that's good. Somebody else has their truth, it's all good for them. We don't have a problem with systems of truth. We have a problem with people who say we can't have our truth because it's different from whatever it is that they're subscribing to. And that's the thing, which is the understanding of truth itself is very central. And here we come to the idea of a paradox itself. Niels Bohr, again, I'm quoting another nuclear physicist, Niels Bohr again says, there are trivial truths and there are great truths. And the opposite of a trivial truth is obviously wrong, but the opposite of a great truth is also true. And understanding those paradoxes is very important and central to the Hindu tradition. And so in our tradition, I'm going to actually, I'm going to do a very non-Hindu thing, which is I'm going to actually cite scripture to you. So here you have, this is from the Rig Veda, one of the Vedas, and here you have the specific verse that says reality is one, truth is one, and the learned and the wise speak of it in many ways. Right? It's central to our Hindu tradition. This is just the way it is. All right, now there's more interesting things to parse there, but I'll keep rolling along. Here's the thing, the ideas of Hinduism are now quite mainstream, and here I wanted to show you this very interesting. It's a Pew survey of beliefs in different places. These are of beliefs of people in India, and the idea that people believe in karma. You look at 3/4 of Hindus believe in karma. 3/4, exactly the same number of people in the Muslim tradition have believe that karma exists. Jain people, of course, it makes sense. Buddhists, Sikhs, and Christians, everyone seems to believe in karma. I suppose many of you believe in karma as well, which is what goes around comes around, but also that there is a sense of balance and justice, as Martin Luther King just said, right? Which is it bends to justice. The universe bends to justice. That there is justice in this universe is understood, and that's karma. That what you do comes around. And so the question I have for you is, if the conditions of birth dictate the key facets of life, if, and I underscore if the conditions of birth are random, then is all life random? And if all life is random, if so, what is the objective of this life? Because if 90% of the facts of my life, how tall I am, how good looking I am, how long I will live, how healthy I am, all of those are driven by, or what family or how wealthy they are, what time I'm born in, all of those are determined by accidental factors of birth. Then surely, if 90% of my facts are random, what's the point of me trying to optimize the remaining of my life and saying, let me lead I have an objective for my life. It's all random, my friend. Go out, just eat and enjoy, or whatever it is. Eat, steal, beg, borrow, and enjoy, right? You can't objectively have an objective for life if you recognize that all factors leading to your birth are accidental. And this is the one lucky sperm hypothesis. But the Hindu tradition doesn't buy that, because then it's all bogus. It's not a very good game if everything is random. You have to have some degree of understanding that there has to be continuity. And so the idea of reincarnation is what I'm building up to, is that life goes on, that the idea of reincarnation. I have two screens, sorry, so I'm looking sideways to get you the right thing. But this is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the Great Forest Upanishad. And I'll let you read this in peace, so I don't have to explain what is being read here.
Can't see it.
Just like a caterpillar at the end of a blade of grass reaches over to another blade of grass and travels over. Just like that, we move from one body to another body. And the conditions of that body are determined by the sets of actions and the events of the previous body, and so on. And so rebirth and reincarnation are core to the understanding of the Hindu tradition, because the moral code, in quotes again I say, derives from that. How may I live? depends on what, because if we had infinite, we do have the idea of heaven and hell, yes, but in general, we don't have infinite, timeless heaven and hell, and certainly not any of the atrocities that you might think of in the hell. But the idea itself, if we had infinite heaven and hell, we would have a different moral system. But here, because one, randomness, our agency is not taken away in the Hindu tradition. I have self-will. I have an expression of self-will, and that expression of self-will determines the course of this and future life. This is central. I'm not going to get into deep theology. Now, here's a fun example that I want to give out to you. I'm almost done giving you backgrounder stuff. So, you can ask me to pause. We will take a break, I promise, in between 10 to 15 minutes. So, so please stay with me. All right, moving on. I'm going to tell you a really fun story. So here's, I watched a really interesting documentary, BBC documentary, about a guy, a Pakistani guy, who went to Sweden, I think, and when he went to Sweden, I'll show you the screen in a second. When he went as an illegal immigrant 40 years ago, and he said for the first 6 months he was really afraid. He was really afraid that the cops were out to get him. The cops were out in the bus. The cops were out on the street. The cops were all over the place trying to get him. But then he said he realized when his eyes settled and stabilized that, you know what? Everyone in uniform looked the same, even if they were a bus driver or traffic warden or a hotel porter. I couldn't tell if they were cops or not. I thought they were all cops. When you're new to the whole God business, all forms of God look the same. But when your eyes settle, you can begin to recognize that there is a generative faculty, there's a creative faculty, there's a maintenance, there's a destruction and dissolution. All of those are facets of God. There's an energy that animates all of us. There is an energy that animates everything in the universe. There is an intelligence that animates our thinking, that illuminates our experiences and our consciousness. When your eyes settle to the idea of God, you don't just have one word for God, then you have many words for God to experience and understand this idea of God itself. And that's why when someone says Hinduism has many gods, it's wrong on many counts. Hinduism is not, it is outwardly a polytheistic religion. It is not. But it is also wrong to call us a monotheistic religion. We're just different. We believe in one reality. The truth is one, but the wise may know the truth by many names. And so all of those experiences of God, once your eyes have settled into spirituality and religion, you understand that the divine may be known by so many different ways. Opulence is God, time is God, right? If you have only one word to describe such a rich breadth of experiences, you don't really understand anything. Now, rumor has it that the Polynesians had 26 words for waves, words or characters for waves, because that's how they're navigating. They need to read the waves, and if all they say is, here's a wave, there's a wave, you can't really go around in the Pacific Ocean and hope to get anywhere. You have to build a more sophisticated language, right? And that's the same with the Hindu tradition. We have a very deep and sophisticated sense of God, and every one of them is valid. We do not laugh at the other person's belief. We just say that system of beliefs, that's how they're thinking. If you think all that is this illuminated experience of consciousness, that's one system of belief. If you think that there is a creator God, like a potter and his pottery, that is separate from the creation, that's another system of belief. We do not have that system of belief, but I'm just giving you a sense. So God is not a uniform, singular concept. The idea of divinity is very sophisticated, and it's very important to understand that. But let's talk about the true nature of reality. What is the true nature of reality? Very interesting conversation in the Chandogya Upanishad, I'm not going to get into it, is about gold. And this father and son are having this conversation, and the son's been educated. He comes back, he says, Father, I have learned everything. And the father says, all right, this is great. I'm glad to hear that. Do you know that one thing from which everything can be known? And the son said, pardon me, that is not part of my education. What is that? And he says, if you know gold, you know that which is made of gold. You also know that which is made of gold. All of this reality, what is the substance that makes up this reality? The detail, the form differences, the variations, the colors, the texture, all of those can be understood by understanding the underlying substance of this universe and understanding the unity of ourselves with the substance of this universe. And that is a very deep understanding in the Hindu tradition, and all the practices get to this, which is let me become one with the source of everything. All right. Now, this is a multi-generational project. When Newton said, if he has seen further, it is only by standing on the shoulders of giants. You do not acquire this knowledge in one generation. You have to have hundreds or thousands of years of peace and prosperity and spiritual ferment to be able to acquire these learnings. It is possible to acquire. However, once acquired, you still need to transmit these learnings. I'm almost at the end of my Hinduism introduction. So once acquired, you need to be able to transmit these learnings to your people. Now, how did a few years ago people transmit E equals MC squared to school children? Well, E equals MC squared of the people was simply duck and cover. Highest learnings can be transmitted in the most simple aphorisms. Duck and cover, because the power of the atomic bomb is so much that you have to shield yourself under the table, right? Stories, aphorisms, memes, and yes, laws are ways of transmitting this higher learning. But not all higher learning is transmitted. The one truth societies don't like higher learning, and one truth systems end up burning their libraries, breaking their findings, and essentially losing all the hundreds of years and maybe scores of generations worth of learning is all up in flames and it's gone forever. We don't remember all the stuff that we've lost from the sack, pillage, and burn. It's very hard to hold on to this sophisticated knowledge because there's always a tendency to burn that which you do not understand. And many traditions have lost it. The Hindu tradition has ways for these truths to travel. And those ways, and if you've been to India, like I know someone on this call at this meeting had said, then you know that the truth that is experienced in India is just extremely, overwhelmingly broad and wide and vivid, right? But you have stories, celebrations, heroes, gods, art, and high philosophy. And I'd like to offer to you that a riot of color is better than a riot, a celebration of life itself. And all the color and variety that you see is the duck and cover equivalent. There's a lot of deep spiritual truth behind it, but everyday people cannot be expected to understand E equals MC squared. You and I use it almost as if we're nuclear scientists, but we're not. We're not physicists, right? It's just a formula that we know, right? But all of us need to be told what the formula is so future generations may carry it. And that's why in the Hindu tradition, truth has been carried and communicated. And the Hindu tradition is extremely, extremely amenable to the SBNR, which is spiritual karma, but not religious type of people. You could be a one God person, million God person, zero God person, do not know kind of person. All of those are available and valid schools of philosophy and perception in the Hindu tradition. There is a deep spiritual culture. Practices and the philosophy and pluralism are vibrant and pulsating through all of Hinduism. And with that, I come to a pause in my introduction to Hinduism. I'd like to ask you to please ask me questions or offer me your reflections.
Could you talk a little bit about how you see the reincarnation as impacting end of life care or grief and loss in family members?
Yes.
Just thinking sort of from a chaplaincy lens.
Fantastic. Yes. Yes. If you like, I can send you YouTube recordings of my memorial talks. Essentially, I teach a class. I mean, I see chaplaincy students in Hinduism as well as at CHI. And I have recorded a series of talks on speaking at a memorial, citing Hindu spiritual text and Hindu thinking. That might be helpful for you to understand what it is. In fact, I did a class at GTU a few months ago. I also have a video of that on YouTube. I'd be happy to send it to you. But when you're talking to grieving families, the fear that the person that is about approaching death, their fear is essentially off scale because they're, usually you're sort of thinking about what happens after death. And then as approaching death, it goes up, up, up and out of, like this is the graph and goes out of the graph because now you're afraid of judgment and infinite heaven and hell. And so the period of death is filled with so much doubt and fear. In the Hindu tradition, we emphasize that this body is quite literally like old clothes. And when your old clothes are old, you shed them and you get new clothes. I told you the caterpillars thing. Clothes is a very common example we use. The nature of the self is not this body. Evidently, I breathed in and out, so I've chemically changed. I had food or I've meant. Number two, I've chemically and physically changed. The body is not the self. The self is what is the consciousness that illuminates this body, right? And it is true, it is important to understand the true nature of the self. So when you're looking at someone who's approaching death, you can easily relieve their fear by saying that the transition is to another life. And so, in fact, the moment of death is a very important moment in the Hindu tradition. We want people to have peace. In fact, when someone dies, we do not say rest in peace because in Hindu tradition, we cremate our dead. There is no idea that the spirit and the body are separated and waiting in some sort of a holding place. And then later they'll be joined together and then judgment will be offered. That's not our system. We don't say rest in peace because there's no resting. You're going on in your journey. If you're at the train station, you don't want to be at the train station forever. You want to catch the next train. We say Om Shanti. May you have peace. And Sadgati Praptirastu. May you have a good onward journey because that's the objective. We want the departed person to have a calm state of mind. In fact, all death rites post-death are designed to relieve the family and the lost spirit. Relieve them of each other and they can go on to the next life. So bringing peace is an important part of the rituals surrounding before and after death. And in the Hindu tradition, last rites are done. We don't like to hold our, the physical bodies for long. Typically 1 day or 2 days, you cremate them almost immediately. Putting on display, Hindus will find it very hard. And I still find it very hard to go to someone's, memorial because their body is lying there and I'm not into that. Because in our tradition, for a certain number of days, it could be up to 30, up to 40 days, the self sort of still remains in some sort of astral planes and is trying to get back into the body. And what we're saying is, look, it's time to move on, my friend. It's all good. Just go. So there's a lot of tradition around this. The family does not cook for 13 days because the smell of food in their home is going to make the person hungry and feel that, hey, I need to eat. Let me get back into the body. The skull is broken, so there is no recourse at cremation time. All of these are practices designed to say, you know what, my friend, it's time to go. And go in peace to your next body. Peace is very important because in a frenzied, confused state of being, then you don't make good choices. And the next birth is going to be a confused or not so peaceful state. So when you're in, when you go in a state of peace, you may peacefully pick your next birth. So I hope, Jessica, that was helpful.
Do Hindus believe that they are reincarnated because their being has additional lessons to learn, and that you continue to reincarnate until you reach nirvana?
Yeah. So it depends on who you ask and how much they know or have they thought about this this whole system. The Buddhist system, for example, everything is illuminated light, and so nirvana is the essential. In fact, nirvana is the puffing out of the candle, so to speak, right? That's the Buddhist system, and Buddhist system also can be moment to moment. Every moment is extinguished same way. In the Hindu tradition, two parts to your question. Is there incremental learning to be had? But that presupposes that there's a certain amount of learning quotient that you go from 0 to 100, and at 0 you get some bonus
Right.
That's not quite the case. There are other heavens. There are also, interestingly, 7 levels of higher and 7 levels of lower planes of being, and you can transmit to higher planes of being, but then it's always coming back down. This plane of being is the one where you can act. You have some degree of self-will, and you can act, and you can ask the question, what is the true nature of this universe, and do something about it. Other planes of being may not be in the same state, but you go and you come back. Is there an end state? It depends on which sect of Hinduism you talk to. In some, the end state is merging back into Godhead. In other states, that merging back is upon death. So it depends on who you talk to.
Thank you.
Other questions or reflections?
Yeah, I have a question to follow up on what Joshua was saying.
Yes.
I always get confused with karma, reincarnation, and my background's a little bit more in Zen Buddhism. And is there a separate self, a contained self that migrates from from one body to the other? Because in Zen Buddhism, there's that idea of the Dharma of interconnectedness, and that there isn't an independent, separate self that. But I went to this workshop on that with a Zen scholar, and I just left very confused.
It's as broad, and if not broader, in the Hindu tradition, the confusion and the variety of beliefs. So there's a very interesting conversation that a young boy has with the Lord of Death, the Yama. So there, it's Nachiketa talks to Yama. Young boy goes to, it's a long story, but essentially there's a conversation a very young boy has with, the person who takes you to the afterlife, with Death himself. And here he asks the same question. And Death says, you know what, you may have all the kingdoms, all the money, all the women, whatever opulences you may have all of that, but not the answer to that question. He says, no, what use is that? If I'm going to die and I don't know what happens after death, what is the point of all this? And he keeps asking. He's given an answer, and the answer is not as plain. I can't tell you that in a quick 2-minute thing. But is there an individual self that transmits versus there a collective self that transmits? There are ranges. There's a full spectrum. And I'll explain what that is exactly the way you asked the question. There is me, this individualized self. There is the divine light that illuminates all our consciousness. It's all of ourselves, right? And there is something in the middle, right, which might be a few people's collective selves and so on and so forth, right? And what is the true nature of the self? The answer is yes to every one of them. Some part of ourselves continues. Much of the physical memory of this self is gone. The light that illuminates all of our being is timeless and changeless. And of course that continues, right? And some part of our memories, collective memories or individual memories, also continue. How much of that? I don't know. I don't remember from my previous birth, unfortunately. and that's just the unsatisfying answer to that question.
Thank you. I remember that story in one of the Upanishads.
Yes.
The boy, what do you
But-
remember which one that is? I want to check that out again.
So just look up Nachiketa, Nachiketa, Nachiketa and Yama. So
Thank you.
yes, there's another question. Please ask, Lucy.
I hadn't thought about this in any other presentation that we've had, but you know, I was raised Catholic and went to a Catholic school. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I specifically recall some pretty intense indoctrination rituals. Thank you. Boy, that didn't come out very easily. And so I'm just wondering about the family structure and the belief system, and if you could speak a little bit to that.
Very broad question. Could you talk about the indoctrination system so I understand what's your angle of question?
Well, and as far as Catholicism goes, I mean, you're baptized as an infant as soon as you're born, or and then in first grade you go to first communion as you're, and you know, there's in a Catholic school there's religion taught, then there's a confirmation, and then I mean there's all these different rituals that, and what I recall as a child is none of it made any sense to me, and it was all just a little party.
Sure.
You know, I got to wear a white dress with a veil. You know, didn't. So I'm just curious about that. Did that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful, Lucy. In fact, I will talk to that in just about 10 minutes right after the break. It is highly dissatisfactory to me as a Hindu practitioner that we don't have a great system for transmitting. We have a very we don't have an organized system. I run a school, so I can tell you that we don't have a good structure for transmitting. We have a great structure, but it transmits organically, and I'll come to that when I come to those parts. But it is a source of much dissatisfaction. We have so much to learn from other traditions in that. Any other questions or comments? We will take a 5-minute break otherwise. And if you have questions during the break that you want to ask me, I'm happy to take those up as well. Carson?
No, I was just going to let them know before they went that I'm putting Katrina's answer to their quiz question, but I was just going to wait until you got finished. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
All right, so at 10:25, should we say? Pacific, whatever time zone you're in. 7 minutes? All right.
Are you there, Carson? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I could see you talking, but I couldn't hear you
Oh,
before.
sorry about that. I just wondered if you were going to answer that question, or is it? Yeah.
Oops.
Yep.
Hello and welcome back. Should we give people another minute or so to come back? Everyone's in?
Lucy? Hi, Lucy, it's Christina. Hi,
Christina.
I have made many Noro sweaters
You have.
and other projects and well, maybe on retreat, I can bring a couple and show you.
By then, I probably will have made my own.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back. I think everyone's in. Okay, the ceremony is about to begin. Sorry. That was a Jim Morrison quote for anybody else who's following along. I think Joshua got it. Thank you for laughing. All right, so we're back. This is part 2, and I'm going to change things around to something different. But before that, I want to know if you have any questions or comments on anything you've heard so far. so that we are not missing any responses. Any reflections or questions or comments? Susan, yes.
Yeah, I really love the invitation in Hinduism to understand the divine in many different ways. And I think I've been wrestling with that question for the last 20 years and just in thinking about it. At one point I told a friend of mine, I remember very clearly, I was like, maybe God is something like time, and so I'd like to hear you say that was really interesting for me. And it just made me wonder if there's specific readings from Hinduism that you might recommend that kind of talk a little bit more about that.
On time or?
Yeah, like this concept of God, like God being time or time being God or something like that. And that might not be an easy question to answer off the top, but.
There's one verse is often quoted and misquoted from the Bhagavad Gita. There are longer talks on that, but I'm going to have to look around for them. The verse I'm specifically referring to is yet another physicist, J. Robert Oppenheimer, quotes that when he's asked about how he feels about the Manhattan Project, and he says, "I am now time. I am become death, the destroyer of all." The actual word in Sanskrit is kalosmi. I am time, all-consuming time, and I have devoured everything that you see in front of you. So that the longer discourse on that, there are some talks that you might be able to find or lectures. I have in my readings, I have not come across a single book that explores this idea of time deeply, unfortunately. Interestingly, in this section, I'm going to talk about, we are very deeply investigating the sense of time as a quality of life determinant. Because like in Alice in Wonderland, we're always running to stand still. We're always late. We're always short of time. And the tyranny of the clock oppresses many of us in the modern world. And one way of improving quality of life is to slow and expand perceived time. And so that's something we've been investigating, how to one, have a score for, a solid foundational philosophical basis for that, but also a solid set of practices that can help slow perceived time and therefore improve quality of life. And that goes back to the Zen training as well, where all you're doing is really just living in timeless time, right? So, sorry, that's an unsatisfactory answer, but that's all I got. Any other reflections on what you've heard so far? If there's anything that caught your attention as being odd or weird, I can talk about it. And I can tell you, I will be disappointed if you don't ask me about the caste and cows in the Hindu tradition.
I'd like to just make a comment about how.
Okay, this is bad. Go ahead. Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. The whole concept of not knowing the answer to what not having a singular answer in terms of what God is or who God is. And I have to say, I have been a spiritual seeker for probably, I'm 64. So we're talking maybe 45 years. And it's because I was so turned off by at a particular time in my life, listening to someone who was condemning anyone who didn't believe in this particular God and that they would all go to hell. And the person was talking about, or the way I took it was, wait a minute, these are all my friends. These are all the people I love. And this, I don't believe this. I can't believe this. And I left. And so I've always thought, I guess I will never believe or belong to any religion because I can't accept that a religion would say everybody else is wrong. So that's really touched my heart.
Sure, yeah. Is it hard to live with the idea of no one right answer? Actually, there are, in the Hindu tradition, there are so many one right answers that are highly concentrated, but you still need to be able to understand their meaning. I can tell you the answer, and it would mean nothing to you, right? Unless you have deep and deliberate practice that helps you understand that the answer. So, for example, one of the Mahavakya, the great utterances, one of those is Tattvamasi, thou art that, or you are it. And Alan Watts does a fantastic job of explaining that in all of his wonderful talks. But you are that, and that's a great way of understanding divinity, which is our essential nature is divine. How do we understand that which we see unfolding in front of us and that which we see inside of us is all the same, one singular self-same divine light? And once we understand that, then we understand the nature of God. Another way to understand that, I use that example a lot, is to understand dreams and the process of dreaming. I'm assuming all of you are blessed with deep sleeps, and sometimes, to quote Hamlet, in some of those sleeps you dream, and in some of those dreams you see other people. And the question I have for you now, as you seem to be awake, is what did you do to those other people in your dreams? Who are those other people? What are they made of? And now your glib answer is, well, they're made of my consciousness. They're made of me, right? I dreamt those other people. And I dreamt also the me, which is not this me, but a dreamed version of me. But you see what's going on there? We have dreamed up the entirety of the universe in our dream, ourselves and other people. How is it to wake up from this experience and recognize that the entirety of this experience is also dreamlike? You and I are not separate, but essentially the same underlying substance, the same underlying light, divinity, consciousness, God, whatever you might call it. And to recognize the true source of your being is to also recognize the true source of everything there is. Many schools of Hindu tradition do not have a creator God. And in fact, pretty much the majority of the Hindu tradition, there is a creator God with, a white flowing beard and 4 heads for all the 4 directions. And there is only one temple in the entire planet to that particular divinity. 2 now that I noticed, one in India in a city called Pushkar, and the other at Las Vegas. So, quite literally, I'm not kidding you. There's a Brahma temple. He is the creator, but that's not the divinity we look to for sustenance, because we look for that creator himself. Our tradition says, very strong tradition within the Hindu tradition says, he himself, when he wakes up out of his wherever he arises from, he spends countless years or millennia investigating his being and asking, what is this about? What am I to do? And he receives the answer, you must meditate. And he meditates upon his being, and then he realizes his reason to exist is to create, then he creates. The point I'm coming to is that it's a very deep and very philosophical take on the whole thing. We don't have this separated creator God who's separate from us. Our words for God are amazingly, we think of them as all the same cognate of the word God, but they mean different things. Paramatma is the supreme consciousness. You and I share that supreme consciousness. Ishvara is that which pervades everything, that is connected to us by love, and so on. So there are different words for divinity. I just gave you a couple just to show off. But you can see that there's a lot that you can get into overall. But the overall sense is what you should probably aspire to, which is, what is your understanding of divinity? A lack of division from yourself and everybody else, a warming up and opening of the heart, and a connection, an inclusion of everything in the universe into that large heart becomes the project. Because when you're in that state, you do not ask the question, what am I and what is God? You just know. And what do you know? What you know is that all of this is me. All of this is not different or separated from me. I have provisionally, for the purposes of this dream, chosen to forget myself in each of yourselves, so I may enjoy this dream. But you're all me. All of this is made out of me, and that me is not this tiny me with a name and form, but the me behind all of us, and that is God. I have more examples in the Hindu tradition, but I don't want to get into deep philosophical soliloquies. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move right along.
Wait, I have one thing, and that is, do you think that the incredible sophistication of this tradition is because it's the oldest tradition in mankind or in humankind by far?
I'd like to offer a little correction. It's the oldest surviving tradition
Okay.
that we know that is continuous. There are other traditions that survive but are not continuous, so it's hard to read their books or understand, reverse engineer back what they might be thinking or how they might be living. This happens to be a continuous transmission. But I do not seek to claim that we are the oldest. I'm sure that in the 200,000 years of humanity, we have arrived at the same truths in many different ways and forms, and this happens to be the one that survives so far. Yeah, I'm going to stop my answer at that before I get into cancellation territory. But no, the truths, I mean, the truths are found in pretty much every tradition. Every tradition eventually arrives at the same truths, but may not be able to transmit it, or their learnings may be transmuted or misused or abused, and so on. So this is, I don't think the Hindus are necessarily claiming or should claim proprietary nature of this. In fact, our entire claim is that these are unchanging and forever truths that we discover. We do not, and we discover and rediscover again and again. All we can hope is to transmit it further into the future, so they don't have to spend 6, 10, 15, 20,000 years acquiring and building up the same massive knowledge. Because like sand mountains, they keep collapsing under their own weight. And so you can just build it up and hope that the mountain carries on to the next generation and they'll take care of it, and so on. Okay, all right, let's talk about something completely different. I'm going to switch over to essentially, I'm going to talk about a Hindu approach to spiritual care and chaplaincy. And I'll try to do this in 30 minutes. It's going to be a rushed affair, but I apologize for being too fast. You can tell me to put brakes on, and I promise to stop and pay attention. Everyone good? All right. There are 4 things I'm going to tell you in this section. The first is the essential idea of Hinduism is that the society acts as a support system, and I will describe what that means. 2, I will present a new and novel framework to understand spiritual care needs. We call it the passage of life, and I'll describe that. And then I will describe a little bit about the significance of spiritual care in the Hindu tradition. So that's what I will try to cover in 30 minutes. I will spend more time on number 1 and 2 and less time on the 3 and 4. But it should give you a good philosophical ground from which to look at spiritual care from a Hindu perspective. And again, you are welcome to go to Hindu Community Institute, look it up. If you like the course, you can join the course. You don't need to be born into a Hindu tradition to take the course. And it runs 24 weeks, and it's free with Om dollars, which is to say you don't have to pay, but you have to pay in service or by helping us build the institute. You don't actually have to pay USD so far. We might change it, but that's the thought process. All right. Now, I'd like to invite you to come with me to the planet Mars, because why not? And 1 second. I'm going to, sorry, just 1 second. I'm going to move a few things around. Okay, in fact, sorry. All right. No, not good. Let's try this. Okay, a little better. Now, here's obviously this is a pun, but let's talk about what happens if Elon Musk is successful and we all go to Mars and live on Mars. Can you live on Mars as it exists right now? Yeah, we can. And the answer is why? Because obviously low atmospheric cover, no oxygen. But let's just imagine you just had oxygen cylinders. You still can't live there. Why? Because it is essentially harsh and unlivable. The pun here is that the Sanskrit word for Mars, the planet Mars, is Mangal. Mangal in Sanskrit also means well-being. So, when you bless someone, Mangalo, which means may all be well. Well, not all is well if you live on Mars. Because of the low atmospheric cover, the temperature range is minus, this is Celsius, so, your mileage may vary, but it's every day the temperature ranges from -20 to -80. Not only is it cold, it swings widely. And because of that, it's a harsh environment to live in. Now, the reason we're able to live on Earth and survive is that harshness is taken care of. We live in a very nicely air-conditioned, comfortable range of existence, as you can see, right? That is the project of the atmospheric layer. That is exactly the function of a well-run society. Think of society as air conditioning for the spiritual self. It is to insulate and regulate the emotional states of its members. Not too happy, not too sad, just right, Goldilocks, right? And that's what is the function. Now, why am I saying that? Is because that's core to our understanding of Hinduism, which is Dharma sustains the society. It ensures the well-being and progress of the society itself. Dharma, one of our definitions of Dharma, remember Sanatana Dharma, is it's what holds everything together. And holding everything together, meaning holding every one of us together as well. And so the function of a well-run society is to regulate our emotional states. But as you can tell, we are failing on that count. We are failing on that count. And that's obvious from the rise of lifestyle diseases. By some counts and by some medical articles, 70 to 80% of modern diseases actually are essentially lifestyle diseases that might be hypertension, diabetes, and a lot of other things that are caused by lifestyle. And the question is, what is wrong with our lifestyle that causes these diseases? Loneliness is one of those problems. The rise of loneliness is now very sharply spiking, you can see across societies, and I'll talk about that in a second. We are just not a well-connected society. A good society coheres, it's well-connected, and people live in regulated states. And the function of spiritual care is to help us regulate each other's mental states, emotional states of being. That's our position at Hindu Community Institute. This is not Hinduism's position. I speak as the dean of the Hindu Community Institute as I tell you this. So that's the program. Now, the problem, and I come now to Lucy, I think your question and many others, which is we are not a congregational system. Hinduism is not a congregational society. Now, who had been to India? Someone had been to India, right? Can you just raise your hand? Susan, you did, right? Okay. Then you know from the minute you landed at the airport that we crowd, we do not congregate. So we're not a congregational society, but the spiritual needs in a congregational society used to be very closely organized. And I want to say used to be because, of course, we are now coming to a place where nuns are rising, NONE nuns, of course, and the alternate spiritual systems like meditation and yoga are now becoming more popular than traditional religion. But previously, you go to your Friday, Saturday, Sunday system, And then you get it's like going to Costco, you get everything in one place. You get someone to minister to you, someone prays to divinity on your behalf, they explain scripture, and they're available for confidential confessional conversations in some traditions, all organized in one place, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's all taken care of. Hinduism, unfortunately, is not a system. I say unfortunate because I'll tell you, I come from a very different world. I come from this world, and I come here, and this entire system is rent asunder. It's just broken up. In the Hindu society, it is not, and I come now, Lucy, to the central question that you had asked at the front end, which is, are we an organized religion? I use the word organized here. We are not an organized religion by a wide margin. Anyone who's driven on streets in India already knows that. We are self-organizing, right? Which means the way the system works, and I'll go back and forth, you can see how I framed this, but for ministering, for just ministering to spiritual needs, you might go to a guru. To pray to God, you could go to a temple, you could have your own altar like me behind in your home, you can pray at your altar if you need to. Someone can explain, some expert can explain what's written in Sanskrit to you and explain. And for confidential conversation, everybody and their uncle is available to have your confidential conversation, or even astrologers. Astrology in India is huge, but it also serves as a release point for a lot of confidential conversations you can't have with other people. So it's a very differently organized religion. Imagine a centrally organized system versus a non-centrally organized system. And now juxtapose that, which is you break down the central society and you move people from the self-organizing system to the West, and you have a problem which is essentially approaching the same problem from two different ends. The Western society is trying to find out how to organize ourselves now that we have to piecemeal our services. We are thinking about how to arrange our services in a way that they're available to people. Because it used to be in the air you breathe, but now we're in the West, we need to figure out a way to serve. And especially the confidential conversation and the ministering part, we need people. And that's the job of a spiritual care person or a chaplain, which is to provide that spiritual space where you can have these conversations and regulate your emotional state. All right, now, needless to say, our society is failing. To quote the Beatles, all the lonely people. There is so much loneliness that's going on in the world, and it's only increasing. This is 2018 data, and I think we can all agree that in the last 3 years, we have not become more connected. If anything, we've become less connected. There's a loneliness epidemic that's sweeping through the society, and this lack of connection to each other and this lack of connection to the self is breaking our society apart, right? There is a tremendous need of the hour for people like us who offer spiritual care. And that's the framework that I'm about to present to you. Any questions or reflections before I get into the rapids? Yes, Louis.
What would you attribute the cause of loneliness to, especially with the rise in the actual population? I know a lot of it is due with the electronic environment, or the social media, has a lot of people isolating and having this sense of false friendships and relationships. But what would you attribute it to?
Yeah, so rise of technology, I actually have a book coming out in June that talks about this. So it is rise of technology is definitely disintermediating ourselves from ourselves. And this lack of connection to ourselves then radiates out and disconnects us from other people, because we don't know how we feel unless we get a certain number of likes on Instagram, for example. We don't know how we're thinking until we hear somebody on YouTube say something, right? We are not connecting to ourselves, and that bleeds out into the wider world. But this is just the last 5 years. The Uno Bomber was around 50 years ago writing a screed about technology and its impact on society. So clearly, this isn't a new thing. 200 years ago, there was Frankenstein's monster. Clearly, this change has a long time coming. It's been around, it's been thought about for longer than we might think. This disintermediation that is brought about by the exponential increase in the efficacy of technology. This isn't just a last 5-10 year thing. It's been going on for longer than we might imagine. But it's not just that. It's also that the rise of technology and the rise of information has led to a questioning of traditional authority. And this lack in the traditional authority that came with the collar is no longer available, because now you can go back and Google it. Same with the doctor. The doctor tells you something, you WebMD it, and you have your own hypothesis. The excess availability of information immediately brings you to question the authority of those that might be previously your sources of information. And that you can go back to the printing press, right? The making available of information cheaply allows everyone to acquire information, and therefore it's no longer channeled through the few handful of learning and teaching classes, and that changes the structure of society right there immediately. So this is a long time coming, but also I go a little further back. I go all the way back to the Enlightenment, and I think a lot of the problems that we have also go back to the rational bent of mind from Descartes onwards, which is this separation of mind and matter. Hindus do not buy that; it's not our system. And this separation of this over materialization and the over investment into rational and the under importance of the noumenal, all of those are just it's a long time coming. This is not new. So the breakdown of societal connection has been coming for a long time. It's not. It just seems urgent, but it's probably appeared urgent to people 300 years ago as well. It's been happening, I feel, for a while. But I would take it all the way back to post-Enlightenment. All the European thinkers that created the framework upon which society is built, economics are built. Those frameworks are very shaky. The economic fundamentals of this society are the rise of individualism. Come on, is the American way, right? Right. And if individualism is to be encouraged as a part of the American way, then why are we surprised that we don't look at collective society as a thing? And so I'm sorry, I'm going to political, but you understand, this is not just about technology. It's about the ideas that frame this technology. And those ideas have a long time of gestation as well. How do you fix it? You can't fix it with technology. You have to fix it by attacking the ideas upon which this is built. The fact that everything is knowable, that everything only available through the proof of your material contact is true, anything else is not true. Those are ideas that if you attack those, then you rebuild a new society that will actually be a better connected society. The inseparability of all of us is essential. The recognizing of a fellow person as also the self you can only get that when you understand the non-material nature of everything. So long screed, but I hope this makes sense. This was a very long walk. I apologize. But I hope that answered your question. Okay, thank you. Coming back to the topic at hand, we were talking about, so how do you fix this problem? I'm presenting to you a framework of thought. This is, again, we're building this at the Hindu Community Institute, but this is open source. You're free to take it and use it. Here's the way we look at life. A modern apartment life, and I use the word apartment, of course, because it is a pun, but also we live in apartments. The apartment life is individual life without any support and sharing. You look at, essentially, we live out our entire lives in this band of loneliness, right? Now, ideally, you'd want to have someone to share your life experiences with, but not. Oh, okay, let me, one second, let me adjust just the matrix a little. I'm going to adjust my head over here, swap around. Okay, now you can read it. Okay, now you'd like to have a support system of family and your friends and your extended network to lead your entire life with, because the spectrum of life comes with highs and lows. Now, here's a question for you. In fact, it's a very interesting quote, a scientific research someone conducted, where they actually asked people that won a lottery what was the best thing and the worst thing that happened to you. And often it is often the same thing, which is the winning of the lottery was the worst thing. It turns out the immediate high of receiving a lottery leads to eventual regret, because now you want to protect your money, you're separated from your friends who you think might be borrowing from you, and so on. And next thing you know, it's not great. So peaks and valleys are both to be avoided. And so how do you look at that? Your family, your friends, your extended network of friends and family has to be with you through your highs and lows, all the ups and downs that accompany life. But what system exists? Previously, you had a community you belonged to, a church you went to, people that you hung out with, and now that's no longer the case. And so what happens is we live alone. But it's not just the negative things. The Hindu tradition celebrates time in all its different aspects. And I will point your attention to two other types of time. There's calendar time, for example, solstice, winter solstice, the equinoxes, and of course the harvest festivals and those are great. That's calendar time. But there's also lifetime, before, during, and after life. All those festivals and celebrations are high points that bring sweetness and texture to life. But not just that time, also personal life. We go through stages of life, and moving from brahmacharya, where acquisition of knowledge is your primary goal, to grihastha, where raising a family and generating wealth and donating wealth is your primary purpose, to vanaprastha, when you're beginning to look at the jungle and saying, I'm coming, I'm reaching out. You're beginning to withdraw from public life. You're no longer interfering in the efforts of your, in the affairs of your family and your kids. And you're now beginning to think about, other things in life. And finally, sannyasa. Eventually, you might withdraw completely and live in a hermitage or whatever, or just alone, separated from society, doing, in quotes, the work. Because you're now done with this life, you're looking forward to the next life, and you want to make sure you're in a good state. Those are stages of life that the Hindu tradition recognizes. And now you look at all of this beauty of life and you bring everything together, which is what we do with this framework, which is now you have a full, rich life, which is rich with tradition, with support, and with sharing the whole spectrum of life all on one diagram. You go through individual life, but now, just like at Mars, not at Mars, just like on Earth, you have a regulatory system that allows you, through support and sharing, to not live in this cold, harsh band of loneliness, but this warm, welcoming, enveloping embrace of society where you feel connected to everyone and everything. But how do we bring this society together? So what we do in the Hindu tradition, what we're beginning to do, this is not a Hindu approach, I'm just describing a new and novel approach that we're creating at the Hindu Community Institute, which is we have a Counselor of Hindu Tradition course. So think of it as a pre-chaplaincy course, spiritual care course. We are positioning ourselves as members of the extended family and helping guide people through all the highs and lows of life. Right? That's what the whole course is designed to do. So when we teach the course, we teach specific aspects of this course. We have experts that come in and talk about, what happens at the emergency room, how to make estate planning decisions, how do you deal with parenting with 2 generations above and below, and so on. So we use this framework to build our entire educational curriculum, because now you can understand each. For example, you look at anything over here and you double click on this and you say, okay, what am I to do here? What traditional wisdom do I have? What tools do I have available to improve this particular life situation, whether good or bad, and so on. And so we are conducting a lot of research into quality of life. We're conducting a lot of research into how to have a simple way of articulating our tradition for each one of these life stages. So for example, if you go to the Hindu Community Institute website, you're going to find, guidance on last rites, for example. Right here, of course, because I'm an engineer and we're all like an engineer MBA, we made a block diagram because that's what one does. If you're an engineer, we made a whole time-wise thing. Like this is what happens if someone's dying in the family. This is the process, right? For the family, from a religious and spiritual point of view, from a medical and regulatory point of view, here are the events. And this is a handy dandy guide. You can download it. And we've got a whole checklist. You can download every one of them, and so on and so forth. We've done the same for pre-marriage. And then we have, conversations you should have, marrying outside the tradition, what are the things you should think about, and then what are the ceremonies and rituals, all of that made available, obviously openly on the website. The project here is to make the tradition available because all that richness is lost if it's not made available to everyone. All right, that was part one of society as a support system, and I presented to you a framework. Okay, good, I think I've covered this. There's more, but I'm not going to get into that. I'd like to ask you if you have any questions or comments on what you've seen so far. No questions or comments? Okay, great. So when we teach the course, and so what we're thinking of on I can look up those slides, I have them here, which is we call it a continuum of care, and we're training volunteers, and volunteers can then train to become professionals offering spiritual care. And within, as a lifetime volunteer, you can then, or you could be paid, it doesn't matter. I mean, we don't have a problem. We have a common insurance that we bought for everyone who's in the community. And so, and then we have a tracking system, and we're creating a phone and web system for people to reach out to us. And then we will send different spiritual care volunteers over to them, and so on. So that's the system that we're building, because our approach is, well, how does a silicon, because the thing is, as an individual, one second, just give me a second. I'm going to vision. Okay, this is the wrong, no, this is the right deck. Okay, one second. So as we're thinking about how spiritual care works, sorry, I'm going to come to, okay, no, vision 4. Okay. And I want to point you to a couple of other resources as well, but let me show you the spiritual care vision as well. Okay. So where, if you're just, our thinking is, if you're just a standalone volunteer, then you're just, saying, I've put up my name, I have a business card, come talk to me about, your problems. But that's not good enough, because it's not scalable and people can't reach you all the time. And there's only so many people that you can help. Can we help each of us more? Can we help more people? Yes, but it needs a better organization. So what we're doing now is we're working with GTU and with the North America Hindu Chaplains Association to create a whole continuum of care that I'll describe. Now, where's care needed? It's needed at families and individual level, but also in institutional settings at offices and at universities and schools. So we reach out to them and create a stronger core of volunteers, which are trained or professionals as working as chaplains that are available, but you can't work alone. So we're also building a whole system around it, which is, you can't be an expert in everything. So can we create a network of supporting experts, whether it's Hindu priests or chaplains or counselors or experts on something or the other? We also need authenticated knowledge assets. So we're building that. So what I showed you on our website were 2 knowledge assets, last rites and marriage. We're building more. And we're building one on quality of life, like I talked about. We're also building a service infrastructure for receiving calls, for case management, so that it can be done scalably. It's like Uber. Previously you needed to know a taxi guy in the city. Now you just use Uber and someone shows up. We'd like it to be that easy that you just ask for help and help appears magically through, of course, the joys of technology. But cases are managed in a way that's legally tenable. Otherwise, it's just chaos all around. And then finally, governance and funding. So we have a common insurance. We're also creating a funding system. Altogether, this becomes a complete system. It's a scalable vision for community care in the society. And for this, there's a really, really fascinating panel that I recorded with, let me see if I can find it. There's a panel that I'll share you the link with you. Sorry that you had to go through my YouTube thing. Let me find part. And this is not it. This is a really, really fun panel discussion that I had with this is a conversation with Bruce Feldstein, who's a Jewish chaplain and at Stanford, as well as Dr. Kamal, who runs the interreligious chaplaincy program at GTU, and with Asha Shipman. Asha Ji runs the North America Hindu Chaplains Association. Very, very fun discussion on this. So I'll share the link with you, and you will enjoy this because you're in the same field. No, so also Anil Molar is from SDI. Fantastic conversation, and I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it too. So, okay, so that's just that. Now we can take another break if you have no questions or comments.
This system that you're building,
Yes.
is it just for the inner bay, or would you extend it to, say, Folsom, where there's a very large Indian community?
No, this is where our aspirations are to build it globally. In fact, this year we have, I think, half our classes in Australia. So we want to build a system that's available globally, but we're beginning with US-wide because essentially the network of supporting, for example, priests and physicians, we want to have, or even funeral homes, getting a directory of negotiated rates with funeral homes. We need to do it city by city. So we're beginning with US-wide, and then we'll go to other countries. What we're doing on the last rites, for example, is you call us, there's a phone number. We will tell you which funeral home. We're not getting any money from this transaction, but we are trying to negotiate rates with funeral homes across the country, where the problem is, as a Hindu, there are things that we want, things we don't want, right? So someone has to tell, these are our processes, this is what we want, and here are the 2 or 3 different packages that you can create. And then those rates are negotiated and available to everyone, and so on. So we're doing that rollout as we speak. We also want to do this at universities across, and just offer that. All of this, by the way, is free. None of this is charged services, but we anticipate that at some point people will be charging for it. We just don't know how that will happen.
Thank you.
Sure.
That looks really exciting, and what an important project. I wanted to ask, in terms of people who may be struggling with, in the mental health area with depression or anxiety, or especially in these critical times we're in, would that also be, I work with students at a college, would that also be a possibility to address some of those concerns?
Yes. So there are 2 things that we're doing on that. The third thing, which is having counselors available, we're not yet beginning that, but what we're doing currently is the day the pandemic lockdown was announced, March 13th, 2020, that seems like a lifetime ago. The next day I was going to have my yoga class at the Livermore Temple, which is close by. And there was a lockdown. So I put out my Zoom account and I said, all right, this is the room. I said, come online and do the class. That worked out. And then we realized that people really want to stay connected. You remember the harsh days of the early lockdown, we couldn't travel out. And we realized that building a sense of community is important, even if it's through these online media. So we created a community for immunity, and we do yoga and meditation classes free all day, all week. And those are available for anyone who wants. It's also on the website. You can go sign up there. And that helps people feel connected, that there's someone doing something for you, that they want nothing from you. They just love you, and that's what they're doing this for. And that sense of connection actually has health benefits for sure. We also teach meditation and of course, pranayama, breath work as well, for calming the mind. I have a few recordings I recorded several meditations on countering news anxiety, because the news at that time, even now, is so anxiety driven. And so so I actually designed and recorded a meditation that's available on YouTube somewhere to counter news anxiety. We do want to set up a system of counselors that are available, but we're still trying to figure out how to do this in a legally sort of sensible way. The problem that we run into, one was insurance, but that's taken care of. The other is almost every psychologist we talk to eventually, it's that, I don't know, there's this rule about the internet where everything becomes about Hitler after, given enough cycles. Every time we talk to someone about mental health, it eventually comes down to people that are suicidal. And then it becomes a no-go, because then you can't set up a service where you have to have a really solid way of dealing with people that are suicidal. And it's important because some people are at that stage, but then it forces us to really think about the way we're designing the service in a sensible and sound manner. So that's what's taking us some degree of thinking. Susan.
Yeah, I just, it's interesting because a couple of my classmates I know are mental health professionals, and when you were talking about spiritual care and the role of society in helping regulate emotional life, and then kind of growing up in a Western context where that's kind of like more siloed into like therapy, and so I'm just kind of curious your take on where does where does psychology and spirituality begin from your perspective? I don't know if it's a clear question, but
yeah, I'm just going to give you my personal perspective. This is not Hindu Community Institute's perspective. I find that Western psychology is a work in progress. Theories have come and gone, but those theories, a lot of the theories are, not more than 100, 150 years old. And a lot of the practices that have come out of them, people have built entire careers, well-meaning people have built entire careers on practices that are essentially new innovations. And I'm all for innovation, but my position is that not everything must be discovered from scratch in every generation. And in the case of psychology, the Hindu tradition, its main genius is the deep understanding of the human being and the human psychology. The subjective experience is the primary field of study for the Hindu tradition. But I don't hear much about Hindu tradition and Hindu perspectives in the Western psychology field. So it's more power to them and all the work that they do, but I find them shallow because they're still innovating. They're trying to iterate in a very narrow space of time. Whereas the Hindu view of the self is very deep. You look at the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain view of the self, their primary research is to understand the universe through the understanding of the self and in the experience of the self. And that does not translate into anything I've seen. Personally speaking, again, as a yogi, I can tell you that the understanding of the energy systems is essential to understanding our inner experience. The understanding, the essential, I call it joy juice, but the Sanskrit word is ananda. The underlying signal, the most deepest signal of our being is joy. Unalloyed, unconditional joy, ananda. In fact, the core, one of the Mahavakyas, the great utterances, is Satchit Ananda. Truth, consciousness, bliss, right? One continuum, that is the true nature of reality. Bliss is the true nature of consciousness. And once you understand that, then everything else is variations or layers or waves of experienced self. And the project of yoga, meditational yoga, not necessarily just the postural one, the project of yoga is to remove these vibrations and variations in the knowing of the self and go directly to the essential signal, which is that of joy or bliss, ananda. And so without understanding that, you have a nihilistic view where the world is nothing, it has no purpose, no meaning, and everything is negative. And now you need to take care of that. So my view on Western psychology, obviously I'm ill-informed, I'm not a psychologist, but I feel that Western psychology has much to learn about the nature of the self and the nature of energy that flows. A good example of that is to look at yogis and see if they're happy, if they appear to have joy radiating, does their presence bring you joy, right? When you say, I'm pleased to meet you, do you truly feel a pleasure upon meeting some people, because the vibration that they're emitting is a vibrational field which is pleasure inducing, right? How do we understand that in the Western framework? We just don't. We just don't have language for that sort of stuff in the Western tradition. So Western psychology, I feel, is shallow and frankly a novelty. So again, I say this as an ill-informed but well-practicing yogi. I'm ill-informed on the ways of Western psychology, but I can tell you from a yoga perspective that energy and consciousness and the nature of the self must be deeply investigated. This separation we feel from each other, the sense of incompleteness that drives us mad. What is the source of that? We must understand. Why do we have a consuming culture where we want to buy more, eat more, have more experiences, and it yet does not bring us joy at the end? Why do we have one candy and we're happy? We have two candies and we're less happy, and at 10 candies we're unhappy? Why is it this world where we cannot have infinite happiness from consuming things? Right? If we don't understand that, then what is the use of this psychology, I ask you? The true nature of reality, the separation we feel, the sense of incompleteness we feel are essential to understanding psychology. The way our energy systems work. I do this in my class illustrations in yoga all the time. Let's do this just for fun. Let's have a little science experiment. If you're right-handed, raise your other hand, whatever hand you have, raise the other hand. Now lower every finger except the pinky. Now look at your pinky nail. And as you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, look at it. Can you grow that nail by about ½ an inch? Or about 1/10 of an inch? Can you grow that nail at all? And the answer is no. It's the less used hand. You can't even grow a pinky nail. What to speak of being in control of this body, and what to speak of being in control of anything in the universe. The energies that animate this body, we do not actually have control over a vast majority of those energies. What pulsates the hearts, what moves the diaphragm of the lungs up and down, what digestive energies we have, those energy systems, what knowledge do we have in the West? We have no knowledge of those systems except a cursory material knowledge. The inner experience is not explored at all in the Western system. But the genius of the tradition is the inner experience. In the Hindu tradition is the inner experience. We know everything by knowing the self. Remember I told you, if you know gold, then you know everything that's made of gold. This is that it. If you know yourself, you know everything that is made of the self, and every experience is ultimately made of the experience of the self. So to answer your question in a long-winded manner, what do I think about Western psychology and its ability to actually have a viable, sustainable position on mental health and wellness? I think it's on shallow foundations, and every now and then a new theory comes in to replace them, because we're still discovering, we're still iterating on material foundations. But I would argue that material foundations are always going to be weak because material foundations only represent a very small fraction of the experienced universe. The self is where we must go, and you can't acquire knowledge about the self in 150 years of work. It takes thousands of years to acquire the language, the texture, the nuance that is needed. Sorry, again, I went on a diatribe. I didn't mean to press that hard on that question. Any other questions or comments? And I'll take you inside a temple and we'll see what the Hindu people are doing. Christina, you don't have a question? Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments or reflections?
I just want to say I appreciated your answer just now. I'm one of those mental health therapists Susan referred to.
Oh, I apologize.
Well, no, and really that's why I'm here, is because of feeling that void and that missing of the deeper experience and whatnot. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, should we take a 5-minute break just to sort of get a change of pace? And I'll then take you inside a temple and we'll talk about what happens inside the temple and what essential daily practices of a Hindu might be. All right, so in 5 minutes, we will reconvene. Hello and welcome back. We will begin in about 30 seconds. Meanwhile, if you are back and you have questions or comments or reflections or unfinished thoughts that might need to be addressed, I'm happy to talk through those. All right, and welcome back. So now I will talk to you about religious practices of the temple-going variety. A question often asked And I do some amount of interfaith speaking. And in the early years of being asked this question, I didn't actually understand the question at all, because people asked me what temple I went to, and I named a temple, and then later I started saying I go to any temple, and I didn't understand what the question actually meant. It didn't mean what I thought it meant, and it's because of the framework differences. In the Hindu tradition, there are sects and systems and so on, but you don't, because we are not a congregational system, we don't necessarily belong to a temple. We go to every temple. You are welcome to attend any temple that you would like to visit. If the doors are open, it just requires that you take your shoes off. And other than that, you're welcome to walk into any Hindu temple and visit and ask questions, and you will be welcome there. And because of my inability to comprehend the question, I didn't realize that people didn't just go to a specific church. That specific church meant more than simply, you go there on Sundays or and so on. There's a whole community around that. Hindus go to every temple. We don't necessarily have to go to a temple. A wide majority of Hindus don't go to a temple regularly. There is no requirement. And a lot of us have altars at home where we've set up our own prayer system. And even those are not required because our connection with the divine is entirely personal. And so to that extent, what need do we have of a temple or a deity in form? And so you can sit in meditation, and that's quite all right. As long as you understand the inherent nature of everything and are willing to connect and participate in that, that's all that matters. Now, there is a big space for temples. Hindu temples are notoriously, or not notoriously, or famously well known to be very opulent places, and rightfully so. Lots of community wealth is poured into the temples and is stored in these temples. In fact, there is a temple in South India which is rumored to have, let me not give you the wrong number, let me just ask you. I'll tell you the exact amount of gold. It is rumored, now this is a Forbes article, I may be wrong, your mileage may vary, but it is rumored that this temple in its hidden vaults below, this is totally Indiana Jones style. They have vaults to which they've not ever opened the doors for hundreds of 20 or plus generations of people. It is rumored that it has $1 trillion. This is a Forbes article. Hey, your mileage will vary, but $1 trillion of wealth in just one temple. The point is, the Hindu temples have been therefore a source of much attraction to Arab and Mongol raiders who came in to raid specifically those temples and take the gold out for other marauding purposes elsewhere. And of course, so the temples are a very important center for the community because they serve as centers for community organization, education, and so on, but also wealth and prosperity around. These temples organize food drives, they organized, during lean years. They're like a bank, but of spiritual variety. So temples play an important role in the Hindu society in general, but there is no requirement to pay a certain percentage of your salary. There's no requirement. People donate gold of their own volition. There's a temple, very famous and very popular temple in South India, where my gift is not going to be as good as some of you have. People actually donate all their hair, not donate, they actually gift their hair as an offering, and that's big. It's big. Though that hair is repurposed as wigs that come back into this country with actually human hair. So the point I'm saying is temples are very opulent, very wealthy places, but not in a personal sort of way. There is no one head of this temple who's making the money. Typically, a trust is running those temples, and the money sits with the temple, not with the one individual. And so the opulence that you see is a reflection of the opulence of all of creation itself. And what I'm about to show you is a proof of that opulence. You walk into a Hindu temple, you're going to see lots of colors, lots of shapes, geometrical shapes, lots of stories evident on the walls, lots of a very fragrant aroma that's inside, a very clean, pious experience, because that's all, you know, divinity to us. And the experience in the temple is that. The other thing to note is that the temple itself, mandir, literally means a palace. So the temple is actually the home of the divine there. So the priest's job is not to give you spiritual counsel or to talk to you or do anything. Their job is to take care of the deity and offer prayers and you know, give them a bath. They're essentially living entities. And that's the important part I want to come to this, because people who don't understand Hinduism think they're idol worshippers. Well, you're also idol worshippers, because you have forms for things, right? The American flag or the Constitution or whatever. That's not here and there. The Hindu practice of worshipping murtis is as lived gods. We invite and invoke those divinities to live in those forms, whether they're geometric forms, in some cases they're geometric forms, or fire, or the actual shape in a wooden or granite statue. But we invite them to live in there. And then when a divinity lives in their house, they have to have the normal daily rhythm. So they are bathed, they are fed, they are bathed, they're put to sleep, and they're sung to. A whole routine and rhythm is organized, and they have their festivals and their marriage and all the good stuff. Lots of really colorful story and history that goes into these temples, and all of that is part of the experience. All of that is part of the experience in a temple. Cassidy, your hand is up.
Yes, I just have a question. So I'm a pediatric hospital chaplain, and I frequently do transplant evaluations, spiritual assessments. And I've definitely, because a common question here in Texas is, you know, what church do you go to? I try to frame it as, do you have a faith community? Is there and the intent behind me asking that question is, who is your spiritual support system? How would you recommend to ask that or discern that information with a Hindu family?
You may just ask them, what is your spiritual support system? For example, is there a temple or a guru or somebody that you follow, or a sense of the divine that attracts you most? For example, behind me, you're going to see a couple of figurines, right? So on the left, you're going to see, on your left as you see me, this is Krishna. Krishna is a beautiful form. He's out in this particular figurine. He is playing a flute, and he is a cowherd, and all the cows are gathered around him. And next to him is Hanuman, who's sitting down over here, right? Somewhere here, okay, here, they're here. This is Hanumanji. Hanumanji exemplifies, he's not the creator, but he exemplifies a devout follower. He's powerful, he has control over his breath, but he's also offering his entire service to the service of the divine. And that's why he's a very revered and much loved figure. So people might have their own expression of divinity that they look up to and they hold dear. And you can ask, what is the expression of the divine that appeals to you? And everyone will have their own, and it's all good. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to show you inside a temple, just so you get a sense of what's going on. So let me parse what's going on. This is a particular figure. And again, like I said, they're not statues. We do not call them statues any more than we call ourselves statues. They are deities because we invite them to stay in these forms so that we may pray to them. And at the end of the worship, we invite them to go back to their abode and return. So we invite them and then ask them to go. And that's for the purposes of worship, because we want a human form. I'll give you an example, an analog for you to understand. Have you heard of this thing called Omicron? Have you heard of this other thing called coronavirus? Now, does the virus care that it's called Omicron? It doesn't care. Delta, Omicron, it doesn't matter. These are Greek letters. It doesn't care what the name is. So we care. So we may know it. We may understand how to talk about it. The human mind is designed to think in human terms. And so we invite the divinity to inhabit these forms that are familiar to us so that we may actually pray to them, even though we understand that the ultimate divinity is formless and qualityless, of course. We understand that, but it's hard for us to hug the universe without giving it the name, the universe. You can't treat a virus until you know the virus has a name. So a name and a form are very important ways for humans to engage. That's how we look at this. But there's a lot of texture that I will not get into, but you're seeing a lot of beauty and opulence, which is what I wanted to show you. Here he's carrying a mace. He's got other signs of divinity that I'm not going to get into. And then there's flowers, beautiful live flowers, and a very opulent thing. What's going on here, of course, is there's a whole worship going on. Oh, no ads, no, stop the ads. One sec. Okay, no ads, okay. One sec, let me also share the audio so you get to hear what's going on in these temples. Okay, let me explain to you what's going on so you can understand. This is like a freeze frame. I like doing this because it's fun. But what's going on here is quite interesting. The divinity that you saw, that form, is sitting somewhere on the other side. We are essentially, this is a particular fire worship. So this fire, this is actually a fire pit. It's not a fire pit, it's a fire kunda. And it has a specific geometric shape you're seeing. And that represents a philosophical view of the world itself. We're not going to get into that. But essentially there's melted butter, clarified and melted butter, ghee. If you follow Ayurveda, this is ghee, fruits, and very aromatic wood chips and aromatic herbs that are available over here. And you see the specific kind of wood, it's not just any wood. They're here because we're going to invite that divinity to come and receive prayer from us in the form and through the message of the fire. Through the form of the fire, we transmit that. That's what's going on. The chanting in Sanskrit, these are all priests that have trained the equivalent of a PhD degree in Sanskrit, their recitation and this process itself. They're using texts that might be thousands of years old, and there's specific style of pronunciation depends on what part of India they're from. South India tends to have more purer pronunciation of Sanskrit in this sense.
Diseases. All the diseases are like
Okay, now that really excites the thing. you're seeing a few other objects of worship. You see flowers. And so what kind of things can you take to a temple? Again, it's not mandatory to go to a temple, but when you go, the whole point is to go with a sense of surrender. What gifts might you carry? You might carry a fruit, a flower, a leaf, or even water. The point is not in the wealth of the things, but the spirit of surrender that you carry as a gift. So fruit, flower, leaves, water, gold, money, of course, everything, but everything is acceptable. You don't have to be wealthy to go with a sense of surrender at all in these in the temple. Here's another thing that I wanted to show you. A lot of the forms of divine are in pairs. So all of the major forms are in pairs, except the single unmarried forms of divinity. Those are not in pairs. But in this case, what you're seeing is a pair. And here he is in a blessing, his hands up in a blessing and giving mode. And this is his wife. Now, what is the wife? The wife is energy. Consciousness itself does not create. You need the word creatrix or a matrix. We are inside the mother herself, right? The creative faculty comes by the one splitting into two and then having the ability to create through that juxtaposition. So we understand the feminine and the male energies, and these are the divine forms that they take. And so they're all almost, Shiva and Vishnu are in pairs, and then you have their entire entourage around them as well. So a lot of philosophical stuff. I'm saying this because I talked about duck and cover, deep philosophical truths that are now encoded into very popular religious culture. I wanted to show you. In this particular video, there's no outside. Let's switch out. I'm going to see if I can show you another video and see if that's got anything going on.
नहि तत् सविदं सेकोः ब्रह्मणा निर्मितं स्वयं योगानिभृता सेवृत्.
Here's an interesting site. This is a Vaishnava practice, as you can see from this sign. This sign, you see from ISKCON, right? If you've seen the Hare Krishnas, they have a symbol, a U-type symbol with a line that goes up. This is that sign, Vaishnava system. And so I'm from a Vaishnava family. That's my faith as well. But interestingly, you're going to see this is Vishnu himself, his two wives. The earth is here, and goddess of wealth is here, and these are these are bald-looking gentlemen like myself, who's these are the sort of reformers or formers of this particular sect or school of the Hindu tradition. So they might be Madhvacharya or Ramanujacharya and so on. In fact, this particular thing I think is Ramayana Parayana. Okay. And this is okay, yeah. Here's another interesting story I want to show you. What you're seeing here is a temple to Lord Rama. There are two major epics in the Hindu tradition, huge, bigger epics than Ulysses' Odyssey, huge epics in Sanskrit. And those are amazing stories, but this particular story is the older story of Lord Ram, which is Vishnu incarnate, who's here in the form of a human being, and his wife who was kidnapped, and the whole story is of him going and finding where she is and recovering him, all too human, and his brother who's part of his trek. And you remember I talked to you about Hanumanji, the monkey form of divinity. I showed you behind me on the right. So that's Hanumanji. He's sitting here. It's a monkey shape sitting like this, and this is a temple to Lord Ram. And if you're following any of the controversy in India, the Lord Ram temple here. So this is Hanumanji, this is Ramchandraji, this is his wife, and this is his brother. They are carrying ammo. They're very pro ammo, because obviously the whole story is about a war that happened. He's not carrying a flute. That's Krishna. He's carrying a bow and arrow, because those are his arms, and that's the story. And he in this form he comes. This form is very dear, because Rama means that which is dear to the heart. Rama means that which you like. He's very dear to us, because the story, in this form he comes in, and he cries, he has sorrow, he goes through entire human experiences, but he's showing what the perfect man is like, which is to say he follows the rules, he's very, by the book, he's doing all the right things. A few thousand years later, the form of Vishnu that appears is Sri Krishna. He is, on the other hand, very different. He's the complete avatar. He doesn't necessarily follow the rules. He twists the rules, bends the rules. He does things in a way to restore systems that are amazingly different and very dear to other people as well. But anyway, the point is, these are the statues and temples that you might visit. The murtis and the temples you might visit. Sorry, no, I stand corrected.
प्राप्य प्रसामो मातुः
Okay, but there is
लक्ष्मणं
a,
रामो धर्मज्ञं
let me pause here, stop sharing. You can now see my screen. Okay, so what's going on in the temple is, the temple is following its own rhythm. The Indian astrological calendar is a lunar calendar. Lunar as well as sidereal. We look at the stars and the moon and the sun. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, but we keep, majority of the holidays or special days are moon oriented. So we're tracking the no moon and full moon and the 11th day, 8th day. I, for example, fast on the 11th day of the moon cycle, so twice a month, and that's in my tradition. And other days of the year are equally, similarly important and so on. But the point is, through the year, we're celebrating a different thing at different time, all the time. And within the day, we're celebrating a different time of day. We have very strong senses of the day itself and how the day passes. So the services that might be offered at the temple might be different depending on the day and the time that you reach. And when you go there is when you go there. That's just the way it works. There are big festivals. They're typically either harvest festivals or they might be astrological festivals. For example, later this month, about 5 days from now, we celebrate the crossing over of the sun to the north side. So the sun's trajectory goes south for 6 months and goes north for 6 months. That's what the solstice is, of course. But now it's Jan 14th. 15th is when we celebrate the turning over, and that's celebrated, and so on and so forth. So all of that goes on in the temples as well. And there are special pujas and services that are going on all the time that celebrate the day, time, and so on. In July this year, there's a Jupiter cycle, and so every 12 years, there's at this temple, and many temples in India, we actually, the temple needs maintenance, right? But the deities are living there. So you can't maintain their home while they're living there. So what the temple does is, we ask the deities to relocate to some sort of a, kalash, but what's the right, some sort of a holding, thing. We request them to move to that. Those are moved out, then the temple repairs can happen. Kumbh. So every 12 years we have a Mahakumbha, and then it's a big thing. And this year in July at the Livermore Temple in California, we're doing the Mahakumbha, and then at that time the temple is of course whatever maintenance and repair needs to be done is done, and then the deities are returned back to their homes, and then 12 years later and so on. So all of that is going on. You'll also see geometric shapes that I don't have time to get into. Yantras are a very important system in the Hindu tradition, and those are also things you will see at the temple. And when you go there, you are always, you get some prasad, which is sort of an offering, and it's typically some sweet dessert type thing, or it'll be sacred water. You receive those and you come back. That's how you come back, by receiving the prasad. So those are all the systems in the temple. Shoes are out, shoes are unclean. And so you always come out. There's a place outside to wash your hands and your feet. So you feel clean as you go in. And you're welcome to visit any temple. Just look at the hours they're open, and you can talk to people that are there and ask about the deities and what's going on at the time. They may not be eloquent, but they'll do a good job trying to explain to you what's going on. And that was a brief visit to the Hindu temple. I cannot transmit the purity of the experience, the beauty and opulence of the experience, or even the texture of smell that you experience. All of those I cannot transmit through this, but I hope you get a sense of the richness of our tradition at the temples. We're almost at the top of the hour, and I want to ask if you have questions or comments before we close. I will close with a closing prayer, which is over here. Any questions or comments before we close? I hope this has been a fun and learning experience. Cassidy, yes?
Yeah, I had a question. So you mentioned that the priests who were chanting had extensive education and training in Sanskrit. Do just the average believer and practitioner, do they also chant, or is it what is that experience like?
Generally, you will find that Hindu people tend to memorize a few texts and they chant along. Some of them are very complex and very magnetic, and people remember those. It's such a lot of fun. But yeah, most people will remember some basic text, but not to the extent that the priests have, of course. And it's not just Indian people. You go to near Santa Cruz, you go to Mount Madonna Temple, or in Hawaii, if you go to the Kauai Temple, there, you're white people that are chanting, doing all the services. It's all good. Yes, there are other questions. I saw hands. Yes, Christina.
Are you planning on being at the April retreat?
No one's invited me, so I have no idea.
We're having a retreat in April, hopefully. And I was just wondering if you were planning on being there.
When and where is it? I may have missed my email. It's just my bad.
Oh, it's April, I believe it's April 4th through 8th. And it's near Santa Cruz.
Oh, okay.
So you might want to ask Katrina, because there will be us students there, faculty, and I think some alumni, but I would love to meet with you in person.
Sure,
I have a request, actually.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. I'll ask.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Louis, yes, sir.
Is there any way to bring the temple experience to the person as a chaplain who may be working in a hospital or some other setting, if that is requested?
Yes, you can, the joys of the internet, you can actually, all of these chants are available. There are some chants that people really, really like, especially, for example, at a hospital setting, typically people like to hear the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, long, complicated word to this Mahamrityunjaya mantra. Maha means great, of course, I've told you that earlier. Mrityu means death. Jaya means victory, the great verse for victory over death. And that's often recited at places where people need just that sense of calmness. And that it's a verse to Shiva, the three-eyed god. We didn't see his image there, but he is sitting in meditative posture. He's three-eyed because he's above and beyond time, and he's all consciousness. And what it is saying is, it's beautiful what it says. I have a detailed note somewhere. Essentially, just like a fruit that ripens and then it falls off the branch on it by itself, right? Just like that, free me from these bonds of death. And it's beautiful. People love that chant in hospital settings, and it's very calm. And it's available on the internet. I can write that up for you over here. Mahamrityunjaya, I think that's the way to spell it in English. And otherwise, Hanuman Chalisa, a lot of the verses, like Hanumanji is the deity I talked about, the one who's a devotional, who's very devotional. There's a very famous 40-verse poem reciting his exploits, and that's very well known, and most people remember it. There's a lot of videos on YouTube you can look up, but Mahamrityunjaya mantra in a hospital is generally very accepted. At another hospital, I'm going to finish up. I know we have another class. Another hospital I remember, in fact, my spiritual journey deepened because of that experience. I was at the Stanford Hospital from a minor operation my son had, and this really, really nice American white lady came up, and she was in tears, and she asked me to read from the Bhagavad Gita. And at that time, I wasn't able to read Bhagavad Gita fluently, but she wanted for a operation for her son, which was a very critical operation, and she was in tears, and I really feel bad that I wasn't able to do justice to the kind of peace that she wanted. She wanted to read verses from the Gita, which can be done. Again, those are, I can, for example, I'll give you an illustrative feel. If you have, maybe I'll do the closing prayers and then I'll do the illustrative feel. How's that? So that way you have, people who need to leave can leave. Now, this is a prayer for universal well-being. This is what the meaning is. I'll be chanting the Sanskrit to the left, which is written in English over here, and its meaning is here, which is essentially a universal radiation of well-being. It does not refer to a divinity or any specific form of divinity, again, and so it's just generally available. It happens to be in Sanskrit as well. So I invite you to join me. I'm going to switch cameras, and then we will sit. So just sit comfortably, sitting in any comfortable posture, sitting with the back straight, back, neck and head in a straight line. Close your eyes gently and relax the expression on the face. Now bring a quarter moon smile to your face. And as you breathe in, let the smile travel down with your breath into your heart, and feel your heart be filled with that smile. Now, as you breathe in and out, radiate that smile and well-being all around. The back, neck, and head are in a straight line. Bring your palms together in Namaskar Mudra to your heart center. We're going to chant Om 3 times, and then I'll chant the closing prayers. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Om. Inhale. Inhale. Now I'll chant. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Take your arms behind your back, grab your right wrist with your left hand, and breathing in, stretch. Breathing out, bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in, release your hands. Rub your palms together to generate some heat, and gently cup your eyeballs with the hollow of your palms to transfer that heat. Then gently blink your eyes and pull your palms back like an open book. Namaskar. So thank you very much for joining me today and for your interactive session. I will pull up a video for those who want to hear the Bhagavad Gita sound. I'm looking up a specific chapter. This is a very interesting verse. chapter in the Bhagavad Gita is a part of the Mahabharata. It's a very beloved text. It's a conversation between Krishna and Arjun at the battlefield. It's a very dramatic scene. But this particular chapter is on deity worship versus formless worship. And I just want you to hear the sound is what I wanted to do here. Hold on one sec. Let me share with audio.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. I bow down to the Supreme Consciousness. Atha Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. And now we start the Holy Bhagavad Gita. Dvadashodhyayaha Bhakti Yogaha. Thus starts the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, called as Bhakti Yogaha. Arjuna Uvacha. After having seen the fierce form of Lord Krishna as the ultimate unified form of existence, and having heard that devotion is the only means to realize and become one with that form, Arjuna had more questions and spoke to Krishna thus. Evam satata yuktaye bhaktas-tvam paryupasate ye chapyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. O Krishna, between those who are steadfastly devoted to your personified form and those who worship the formless unity, who are the ones who are better yogis? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Lord Krishna replied, Maya Veshya Manu Ye Mam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Parayopetaha Te Me Yuktatama Mataha. Those who fix.
All right, I'm going to stop. This can go on. Of course, this is a 6-minute chapter, but you get the idea that there's a lot going on here. All right, so you could play something like this, and it's very calming, and it's very. It brings a lot of perspective to people. All right, with that, I think we come to an end. I'm still available for a few more minutes. If you have questions or comments, if you liked it or didn't like it, I'd like to hear that from you directly. And of course, I always look forward to your feedback, but that's a month out. So if you have things you liked or took away, I'd like to hear it just so I have closure.
It's very informative. I love the information and hopefully be able to incorporate it if I can retain a lot of it. So hopefully my notes will work for me. And thank you for the links.
Sure. I hope to find the recording somewhere. And if I get it, I will parse it and upload it in a way that you can go back to the notes. All right. If there are no other reflections, I thank you very much for your time together. And I appreciate your presence, and I thank you, and I wish you luck for the rest of your course, and thank you for the service that you do in healing the society and bringing everyone back into emotional regulation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.